Hey there, my name is Mike Montgomery, and today I'd like to show you how I built this picture frame with solid wood matting, made all out of 2x4s on modern builds.
Now I'm going to talk more about it at the end of the video, but this is all part of the 2x4 challenge that was put on by the Modern Maker podcast, which is a bi-weekly show that I do with my two friends Chris Salamoni and Ben Ueda. And if you haven't checked it out, you totally should. Links are in the description, but let's not talk about that yet. Let's get this project started. So as the name implies, the challenge is to build anything you want out of two 2x4s. You could use all of the wood or as little as you want. And I've had this idea to build picture frames with solid wood matting for a long time. So after I cut my pieces for the matting to length, I moved over to my table saw and re-sawed them to just over 1/8 of an inch thick each. Now I had never done this method before, but it actually worked out really well. You just want to make sure your blade is really square to the table. That way you get pretty level finishes. But to clean everything up a little bit more and to make sure everything was exactly the same width, I moved over to the thickness planer to take them down to 1/8 of an inch. My next step was to cut all of these pieces for the matting to length, and I did that a little oversized. I cut my two long pieces as well as all of my short pieces to about 3 inches. This gave me a little bit of room, that way once I had everything glued up, I could trim my two outside edges square. This glue up is particularly interesting though, in that I need to make sure my inside edges are as perfectly straight and square as possible. Most glue ups, once they're dry, you can come back and trim them up or square things up, but with this, since my edges are on the inside, I've really got no way to come back and clean them up. So, like I said, make sure everything is square and where it needs to be before you tape everything up. Once I knew everything was square, I could go ahead and add glue in all of those seams. This is a really simple way to glue up super thin panels, and to help keep everything as flat as I could get it, I used masking tape to hold it to the tabletop, which is obviously flat. Now I know I'm using the miter gauge backwards here, but because the matting is so wide, there was no other way for me to use it. If you're gonna do this, make sure you're safe. And after I sanded it to 220 grit, I got some whitewash stain to help kill some of those red-orange tones that are in the fur. I had never used this before, but it actually came out really cool, so now that I know it works, I can think of ways to use it in the future. Moving on to the frame, I started by first cutting my second piece of 2x4 down to a 5/8 inch strip, then that 5/8 inch strip down to 1 inch wide, so it'll give me a 1 inch by 5/8 inch piece. Now I needed a recess for the glass and artwork to sit in the back of the frame, so I'm using the table saw using multiple passes to create a rabbet on the back of it. Then I moved over to the miter saw and cut my 4 pieces to length. Lately, I've been using this masking tape clamping method a lot with mitered corners. It's super fast, super easy, and really easy to adjust everything to make sure things are square. Once I did that, I sanded everything up to 220 grit and put on a couple thin coats of a semi-gloss black paint. You can make just about anything as complicated as you want, but I just chose to use some masking tape to attach my artwork to the back of the mat. Then I just dropped my pane of glass that I got cut at Lowe's in, then my matting. Now as you just saw, you could see my matting really bow a lot. That happened as it dried. So I just got some blocks of scrap wood and I hot glued them to the back of the mat. The tension in the wood that makes it want to bow isn't as strong as those blocks of scrap wood, so everything stayed flat. Then I hot glued some blocks to the matting as well as the frame, and that kept everything clamped and unable to slide around. Finally, I attached some hardware to hang the picture and attached a hook to the wall. These things are actually pretty cool. I don't know if you've ever seen them before, but you don't need any screws or anything. They just poke through the wall and kind of attach themselves. Really easy. Overall, this was totally an experiment. I had no idea if solid wood matting would work, and I'm super excited that it did.
So like I mentioned a second ago, this really was just an experiment. I had the idea to do some solid wood matting a long time ago, and when I had a fan paint this awesome picture and send it to me, I thought there's not a better opportunity than right now. I really didn't know how the wood would act once I got it into such thin strips. I thought it would bow, but I had no idea it was going to the extent it did. But the good thing with it being 2x4s was I was able to flatten it out really easy because they didn't have a lot of strength going this way. Shout out one more time to Trey for painting and sending this awesome picture to me. I've never had anything like this before, so I wanted to build something special for it. I'll have links down in the description to his Instagram. Also in the description, I'll have links to the Modern Maker podcast, which if you're not already listening to, you should be. It's a lot of fun, and Ben and Chris are both really awesome hosts to be able to do this with a couple times a week. And like I said earlier in the video, there is plenty of time to make something still for the 2x4 challenge. That is, if you're watching this relatively soon to when I put this video out. The challenge doesn't close until June 1st, 2017, so if you're watching and still have time, get some 2x4s and make something. Kind of felt like David Picciuto saying make something there. Anyways, thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you haven't subscribed, click this link right here in the center of the screen, and if you want to watch Ben and Chris's videos, links are on the screen and in the description. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next week on Modern Builds.